The frost bit at Rowan's exposed skin, a merciless predator in the twilight of the whispering woods. It wasn't the cold that chilled her to the bone, however, but the echo of her father's final words. "A curse! You were born a curse on this family, on this pack." His voice, usually a booming command that could halt a charging beta, had been a low, venomous hiss. Her mother had simply looked away, her face a mask of disappointment, the same mask Rowan had seen her wear for all of her 17 years. They hadn't even looked back as they left her at the edge of their territory, a lone, shivering girl in a threadbare tunic, cast out from the Stonecrest pack. Her crime? Failure. The ultimate failure for a werewolf. She had failed her first shift. On the night of the full moon, when her peers had writhed and broken and reformed into powerful, sleek wolves, Rowan had only convulsed in agony, her bones grinding but never yielding, her human form stubbornly refusing to break. The pack elders had called it a blight from the moon goddess herself, a wolf without a wolf, a hollow shell, cursed. Now, 3 days into her exile, survival was a desperate, moment-to-moment struggle. The woods, which should have felt like an extension of her own soul, felt alien and menacing. Other wolves, rogues and predators scented the air. She was prey, weak, human. But she wasn't entirely helpless. The curse that had seen her abandoned had side effects. While she couldn't call upon the strength of a wolf, she felt a strange thrumming connection to the forest itself. She could feel the flow of water under the frozen earth, sense the life pulse of the ancient oaks, and hear the silent, growing language of the moss. It was this strange sense that had led her to a small, hollowed-out log, barely large enough to shelter her from the wind. It was what helped her find a patch of winter-hardy berries that weren't poisonous. A twig snapped behind her. Rowan froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't the sound of a squirrel or a deer. It was heavy, deliberate. A predator. Her hand tightened around a sharp rock, her only weapon. She scrambled deeper into the log, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. The scent hit her first, rolling in on the frigid air. It was nothing like the damp earth and pine scent of her old pack. This was ozone after a lightning strike, wild mint crushed underfoot, and the deep, resonant warmth of a fire on a winter's night. It was powerful, dominant, and utterly intoxicating. It called to a part of her she didn't know existed, a slumbering, hollowed-out space within her that suddenly ached with a profound sense of belonging. A shadow fell over the entrance to her hiding place. A massive figure blocked the fading light, broad-shouldered and radiating an aura of command that dwarfed even that of her former alpha. He knelt, his movements fluid and unnervingly silent for a man his size. His face was all sharp angles and stark beauty, framed by raven-black hair that fell across a strong brow. But it was his eyes that captured her, the colour of molten gold, burning with an intensity that seemed to see straight through her flesh and into the tattered remnants of her soul. An alpha. Not just an alpha, but one of primal, ancient power. His gaze swept over her, the dirt-smudged face, the torn tunic, the trembling form. She braced for the disgust, the dismissal she knew so well. It never came. Instead, his golden eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief and something else, something fiercely possessive, igniting in their depths. His voice was a low growl, a rumble that vibrated through the very ground. You! It wasn't an accusation, it was a recognition, a discovery. His wolf was right there, shimmering beneath his skin. She could feel its power, its shock, its overwhelming, instantaneous devotion. And from the empty place inside her, a faint, ghostly echo answered back. It was a whisper of a wolf, a phantom limb, but it reached for him with a desperation that stole her breath. He reached a hand toward her, slowly, as if not to spook a wild thing. She flinched back, the rock held tight in her fist. "I won't hurt you," he said, his voice softening, though the raw power beneath it remained. "What is your name?" "Rowan," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Rowan," he repeated, the name a vow on his lips. He inhaled deeply, his eyes closing for a moment as if savouring a rare perfume. When they opened, they were blazing. "I am Darian, Alpha Prince of the Moonshadow Pack." Alpha Prince. The name sent a tremor of fear through her. The Moonshadow Pack was legendary, a powerhouse that ruled the vast, ancient forests to the north. They were said to be descended from the first wolves, powerful and uncompromising. "What are you doing in the borderlands so far from your pack?" he asked, his gaze never leaving hers. Shame washed over her, hot and bitter. I was left." Darian's jaw tightened, a dangerous glint entering his eyes. "Left?" "I am packless," she admitted, the word tasting like ash. "Cursed." She expected him to recoil, to stand up and leave her to her fate. A cursed, packless Omega, she was less than nothing, a danger, an ill omen. Instead, Darian moved closer, the heat from his body a tangible thing in the freezing air. He reached out again, and this time she didn't have the strength to pull away. His fingers, calloused and warm, brushed a strand of matted hair from her cheek. The touch was electric, a jolt of pure energy that shot through her system, silencing the shivering in her limbs. And then he spoke the word that shattered her world and rebuilt it in a single heartbeat. "Mine." The word wasn't just spoken. It was a decree. It sank into her bones, a claim staked on her very soul. His wolf was calling to her, recognizing her, and the phantom wisp of her own spirit howled in joyous, terrified answer. The mate bond. It was the stuff of myth and whispered stories, an instantaneous, unbreakable connection, a fate decreed by the moon goddess herself. And it was happening to her. Cursed, broken Rowan. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed for her own abandonment now streamed down her face, tears of shock, of fear, of a terrifying, burgeoning hope. Darian's expression softened with a tenderness that undid her completely. He gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "The goddess does not make mistakes, little one. They were fools to cast you out. They threw away a diamond, thinking it a common stone." He gathered her into his arms, lifting her from the hollow log as if she weighed nothing. Her body screamed in protest from the cold and hunger, but she sagged against his chest, overwhelmed by the impossible safety of his embrace. The sharp rock fell from her nerveless fingers, clattering uselessly on the frozen ground. He held her close, burying his face in her hair, his deep inhale a sound of pure possession. His wolf was ecstatic, a rumbling purr vibrating through his chest and into hers. "They called you cursed and left you to die," he murmured against her scalp, his voice a lethal promise. "But I call you mate, I call you mine, and I will have the heads of any who dare to call you otherwise." He pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes, his golden gaze searing her with its intensity. "I'm taking you home, to your new pack, to your new life." For the first time since her birth, Rowan didn't feel cursed. She felt claimed. And as the Alpha Prince carried her away from the site of her death sentence, she dared to believe that this was not an ending, but a ferocious, terrifying and wondrous beginning. The journey to the heart of the Moonshadow territory was a blur of warmth and strength. Darian moved with the tireless grace of his wolf, carrying Rowan as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. He wrapped her in his own thick, fur-lined cloak, shielding her from the wind. For the first time, she wasn't cold. The heat radiating from him was a constant, living furnace, and the steady beat of his heart against her ear was a rhythm that soothed the frantic terror in her own. They spoke little. Rowan was weak, drifting in and out of a dazed state of exhaustion and disbelief. Darian seemed to understand, content to simply hold her, his presence a silent, unshakable bulwark against the world that had discarded her. The mate bond was a living thing between them, a current of energy that flowed from him to her, lending her strength, and from her to him, a current of something he seemed to find utterly captivating. She could feel his awe, his curiosity, his fierce protectiveness. It was bewildering. As they drew closer to his pack's main settlement, the forest changed. The trees grew taller, their branches heavy with moss that seemed to glow with a faint, silvery light. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth, night-blooming flowers, and the concentrated power of hundreds of werewolves. It should have been intimidating, but filtered through Darian's presence, it felt like a homecoming. They emerged into a vast, natural clearing. It wasn't a town of rough cabins, as she'd imagined, but a breathtaking settlement woven into the fabric of the forest itself. Dwellings were built into the sides of hills and into the boles of colossal ancient trees, connected by gracefully arching bridges of living wood. A waterfall cascaded down a rock face into a shimmering pool, its mist catching the moonlight and scattering it like diamond dust. It was beautiful, ethereal, and pulsed with a raw, natural power. As Darian strode into the heart of the settlement, figures emerged from the dwellings, their movements silent and curious. Their gazes fell on her, wrapped in their prince's cloak, held tight against his chest. Whispers followed them like the rustling of leaves. She could feel their shock, their questions. Why was the Alpha Pry prince carrying a waif? A human? An Omega? The scent of her packlessness, of her strange non-wolf nature, must have been obvious to their keen senses. She tensed in his arms, the old shame coiling in her gut. Darian's arms tightened reassuringly. "You are with me," he rumbled, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Let them look. They will learn to see you as I do." He didn't take her to a healer's den or a guest house. He walked straight toward the largest of the tree dwellings, a magnificent structure whose upper levels disappeared into the canopy of a monumental silver birch. This was the heart of power, the Alpha's Hall. Two imposing warriors, shifted to their imposing wolf forms, flanked the entrance. They dipped their heads in deference as Darian approached, though their intelligent wolf eyes were filled with confusion as they looked at Rowan. Darian didn't slow. He entered a great hall, warm and filled with the scent of burning cedar and roasted meat. A huge circular hearth dominated the center of the room, its flames leaping high. Seated in a high-backed chair, carved from the wood of a single massive root, was a man who could only be Darian's father. He was older, his black hair streaked with distinguished silver at the temples, but he possessed the same broad shoulders and the same molten gold eyes. His presence filled the room, an ancient and unyielding authority. This was Alaric, the Alpha King of the Moonshadow Pack. Alaric's gaze fell upon his son, and then to the bundle in his arms. His eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with sharp, analytical intensity. "Darian," His voice was a deep baritone, calm but commanding. "You were patrolling the Stonecrest border. What have you brought back?" Darian stopped before his father, his stance respectful but unbending. He did not set Rowan down. He held her as if she were his crown. "I have brought back my mate, father," he said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. A stunned silence fell over the hall. The handful of other pack members present froze, their eyes wide. Alaric himself looked taken aback, his regal composure cracking for a fraction of a second. "Your mate?" Alaric's eyes swept over Rowan again, and this time she could feel the full force of his alpha power assessing her. It was like standing before a mountain. He would scent her lack of a wolf, her weakness, her curse. She braced for the inevitable dismissal. "She is packless," Alaric stated, his voice flat. "And her scent, it is faint. She has not shifted." "Her name is Rowan," Darian said, his tone layered with warning. "Her pack of birth, the Stonecrests, cast her out. They left her to die in the frozen march because she did not survive her first shift." The contempt in Darian's voice for the Stonecrest pack was a palpable thing. Alaric's expression hardened. To abandon a pack member to the wilds, especially a young one, was a dishonorable act, a sign of weakness in an alpha. "And the bond?" Alaric pressed, his gaze sharp. "It is true? Not a trick of scent or proximity?" "It is as true as the moon in the sky," Darian said, his voice softening as he looked down at Rowan. "My wolf knew her the moment I laid eyes on her. My soul knows her." Rowan felt a blush creep up her neck. To have such things declared so openly, so fiercely, was more than she could process. Alaric was silent for a long moment, studying them. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the joy for his son finding his fated mate, warring with the political and practical reality of what she was. A Luna who couldn't shift. An alliance with a broken, cursed Omega. It was unprecedented. A potential weakness. From the shadows near the hearth, a figure moved forward. A woman, tall and elegant, with hair the colour of pale moonlight and eyes like chips of ice. Her movements were graceful, but there was a predator's edge to her, a tightly coiled ambition. "My prince," she said, her voice smooth as silk but with an undercurrent of challenge. "You have returned, and you have brought a guest." She looked at Rowan, and her smile didn't reach her cold eyes. "She looks frail. Perhaps the healers should tend to her." Darian's jaw clenched. "Thank you for your concern, Celine, but my mate will not leave my side." He emphasized the word mate, a clear territorial claim that made the woman's smile tighten almost imperceptibly. Celine was the pack's beta healer, but her ambition was an open secret. She had long made it clear she hoped to be Darian's chosen mate, a political match that would have elevated her status immensely. Rowan could feel the woman's animosity like a physical force, a wave of cold jealousy and contempt. Alaric finally spoke, his decision made. The boy's heart and his wolf have chosen. The goddess has spoken. It is not our place to question her will. He rose from his chair, a king acknowledging a new reality. "Rowan of the Moonshadow Pack," he declared, his voice resonating with power, formally accepting her. "Welcome. You are under our protection now." He looked at Darian. "Take her. See to her needs. She is exhausted." It was a dismissal, but it was also a blessing. Relief, so potent it made her dizzy, washed through Rowan. "Thank you, father," Darian said, dipping his head in respect. He turned, ignoring Celine's venomous glare, and carried Rowan from the great hall. He took her up a spiralling staircase, carved into the living wood of the tree, to his private chambers. The room was spacious and masculine, with furs thrown over a large bed and a balcony that opened up to a stunning view of the moonlit forest. A fire was already crackling in a stone hearth. He finally set her down on the edge of the bed, his movements gentle. For the first time, she was standing on her own 2 feet, and she felt impossibly small in the vastness of the room, in the vastness of her new life. Darian knelt before her, taking her small, dirt-stained hands in his. "I know this is overwhelming," he said softly, "but you are safe here. No one will ever harm you again. I swear it on my life." "Why?" she whispered, the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why me? I am nothing. I'm broken." Darian's golden eyes were fierce with sincerity. "You are not broken. You are different. When I first scented you, it wasn't just your distress I smelled. It was the scent of ancient earth, of deep roots, of the forest after a spring rain. It's a scent my wolf has been searching for its entire life. Whatever this curse is that they named, it is the very thing that makes you, you, and it is the thing my soul requires." He stood and began to busy himself, pouring a basin of warm water, laying out clean, soft clothes, a simple tunic and leggings that looked impossibly fine to her. He found a loaf of bread and a piece of cheese, placing them on a small table. He did it all with a quiet efficiency, giving her space, but never letting her feel alone. "Eat," he urged gently, "and then rest. We have much to talk about, but it can wait for the dawn." She ate, the simple food tasting more delicious than any feast she'd had in her old pack. As she chewed, she watched him. The Alpha Prince, her mate. He stood by the balcony, looking out at his lands, a silent guardian. The moonlight caught in his dark hair, and she saw the immense weight of responsibility he carried. He was a prince, a future king, and he had just bound himself to a girl with no wolf, no status, and no power. He had claimed her in front of his father and his pack, defying convention and inviting challenge. He hadn't hesitated. He had simply chosen her. As she finished the last of the bread, a profound exhaustion settled over her. Darian turned as if sensing her fatigue. He gestured to the bed, with its mountain of soft furs. "Sleep, Rowan." She hesitated, her ingrained fear and insecurity rising up. She was not worthy of such comfort, of his bed. He seemed to read her thoughts. A soft smile touched his lips. "It is your bed now, too." He walked over and pulled back the furs, his message clear. Shyly, she slipped into the bed, sinking into a world of warmth and softness she had never imagined. It smelled of him, of mint and lightning and safety. He pulled the furs up to her chin, his knuckles brushing her cheek. The innocent touch sent a shiver of awareness through her. He didn't join her in the bed. Instead, he took a thick fur and settled into a large chair near the fire, positioning himself between her and the door, a protector, a sentinel. "Sleep well, my mate," he murmured, his golden eyes glowing in the firelight. As her eyes drifted shut, the last thing she saw was the silhouette of her Alpha Prince, watching over her. The whispers of the pack, the cold glare of Selene, the judgment of the Alpha King, it all faded away. For the first time in her life, Rowan fell asleep feeling not cursed, but cherished. And in the safety of his presence, the phantom wolf inside her finally slept without fear. The next few days passed in a haze of healing and discovery. Rowan's body, battered by the cold and starvation, slowly recovered under a constant supply of warm food and deep, restful sleep. Darian was a constant, steady presence. He seemed to understand her deep-seated fear of being a burden, of being underfoot, and he moved around her with a gentle, non-demanding patience that slowly began to dismantle the walls around her heart. He would bring her meals himself, sitting with her while she ate, telling her stories of his pack and the history of the Moonshadow lands. He spoke of the great trees that formed their homes, of the pacts their ancestors had made with the spirits of the forest, and of the sacred duty of the Alpha to protect not just the pack, but the land itself. In his words, she heard a reverence for nature that resonated with the strange, thrumming connection she felt to the world around her. Her curse was a quiet thing in these first few days, a constant, low-level hum of awareness. She could feel the intricate network of roots beneath the Alpha's hall, feel the pulse of the sap rising in the great tree they lived within. When Darian brought her a cup of mint tea, she could almost taste the memory of the sunshine and soil the plant had grown in. It was a language she was only beginning to understand, and she kept it secret, terrified it would be seen as further proof of her abnormality. The pack, for its part, kept a respectful distance, a clear edict from the Alpha King. They were curious, their gazes often following her when she and Darian walked the lower levels of the hall. But they were not hostile. They were watching, waiting, judging. She was the prince's chosen, but she had not yet proven herself as their future Luna. The only open hostility came from Selene. The beta healer would find subtle ways to challenge and belittle Rowan. "You must be so exhausted, dear," Selene said one afternoon, her voice dripping with false sympathy as she found Rowan in the common hall. "It's such a burden on our prince to have to care for you so. Usually, a mate is a source of strength for an alpha, not a drain." Rowan flinched, her cheeks flushing with shame. Before she could form a reply, Darian's hand was on the small of her back, a warm, possessive anchor. "My mate is the greatest source of strength I have ever known," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. His golden eyes locked on Selene, and the beta visibly paled, the predator in her recognizing its superior. She survived 3 days in the frozen march after being betrayed by those sworn to protect her. Do not mistake her gentle nature for weakness, Selene. You would be making a grave error. Selene offered a hasty, tight-lipped apology and scurried away. Darian turned Rowan to face him, his hands cupping her face. "Do not listen to her," he commanded softly. "Her words are born of jealousy and ambition. They have no truth." "But she is right," Rowan whispered, unable to meet his gaze. "I can't shift, I can't fight, I can't run patrols or join the hunt. What good am I to you, to the pack?" "You are good for me," he insisted, tilting her chin up until their eyes met. "Rowan, the strength of a Luna is not just in her claws and teeth. It is in her wisdom, her heart, her connection to the pack's soul. You have a heart that has endured cruelty and has not become cruel. That is a strength greater than any wolf form." His unwavering belief in her was a balm, but the insecurity was a deep and festering wound. She wanted to believe him, but 17 years of being called useless and cursed were not so easily unwritten. The true test came a week after her arrival. Darian's father, Alaric, summoned them to the Great Hall. The Alpha King was not alone. The pack's elders were with him, their faces stern and etched with the wisdom of many years. "Rowan," Alaric began, his voice formal, "you have been welcomed into this pack as my son's mate. You have been given our protection and our name. But a Luna is more than a mate. She is a leader. The pack needs to see your worth." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Rowan. This was it, the trial she had been dreading. "There is a sickness in the Gloomwood. One of the elders, a grizzled old wolf named Fenris, explained. "A blight," It is poisoning the trees, and the deer that feed upon them are growing weak and ill. The hunt has suffered. Our best healers, even Selene, have been unable to find the source or a cure. Alaric continued, his golden eyes fixed on her. They say the blight feels unnatural, magical. Rowan's heart began to pound. A blight on the forest. The words resonated with the strange hum inside her. Tomorrow at dawn, Alaric declared, a party will travel into the Gloomwood to attempt to locate the heart of this corruption. You will accompany them. A murmur went through the elders. To send a shiftless girl into a dangerous, blighted wood. Selene, who was also present, stepped forward, her face a mask of concern. Alpha, with respect, she is not a warrior. She has no wolf to defend herself. She will be a liability, a danger to the entire party. She will be protected by my son, Alaric stated, his word final. He then looked directly at Rowan, his gaze intense. This is not a test of strength, girl. It is a test of spirit. We wish to see what this curse of yours truly Islandarian believes it is a gift. Tomorrow, you will have the chance to prove him right. The challenge was laid bare. She would not be judged on her ability to fight, but on her strange connection to the world, the very thing that had made her an outcast. It was a terrifying, yet strangely liberating prospect. That night, the fear returned in full force. She lay in the great bed, staring into the darkness, her body rigid with anxiety. She would fail. She would prove Selene right, and shame Darian in front of his entire pack. The bed dipped as Darian slipped in beside her. He didn't touch her immediately, just lay there, his presence a warm line in the cool sheets. You're afraid, he murmured into the darkness. I'm going to fail, she choked out, tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know what they expect me to do. I can't heal a forest. Can't you? He asked softly. He rolled onto his side to face her, his hand finding hers in the dark, his fingers lacing through hers. Tell me what you feel, Rowan, when you are quiet, when you touch a leaf or stand beneath the trees. Tell me what your curse feels like. No one had ever asked. No one had ever wanted to know. Tentatively, she began to describe it. The hum of life, the language of the roots, the taste of sunlight on a flower petal. She told him how she could feel the great tree they lived in, feel its slow, steady life force like a heartbeat. He listened patiently, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. That doesn't sound like a curse to me, he said when she was finished. It sounds like a song that only you can hear. Don't be afraid of it. Tomorrow just listen to the song. He pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her, drawing her head to his chest. She rested her ear against his heart, the steady thump-thump a counterpoint to the wild racing of her own. His other hand stroked her hair, a soothing, repetitive motion. I will be with you every step of the way, he vowed. I will not let anything harm you. Just trust yourself. Trust what you feel. Held in his arms, feeling the solid strength of him, the absolute conviction in his voice, a small kernel of courage began to grow within her. He believed in her. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could learn to believe in herself. She fell asleep to the sound of his heart. The phantom wolf within her curled at the base of her soul, listening intently for a song it did not yet understand. The air in the gloomwood was heavy and stagnant. A pall of grey mist clung to the ground, refusing to burn off even as the morning sun climbed higher. The usual vibrant greens of the forest were muted, replaced by sickly yellows and browns. The very silence was unnatural. There were no bird calls, no rustling of small creatures in the undergrowth. There was only the crunch of their boots on brittle, dying leaves. Rowan walked in the center of the party, a small human figure amidst a dozen powerfully built werewolves. Darian was a constant presence at her side, his hand resting lightly on her back, his golden eyes scanning their surroundings with predatory focus. Selina walked near the front, her posture radiating disapproval, her occasional backward glances filled with scorn. The further they went, the more oppressive the feeling became. The other wolves, with their heightened senses, grew agitated. They smelled decay, a wrongness that set their teeth on edge. To Rowan, it was more than a smell. It was a feeling, a deep, aching pain that resonated from the earth itself. It felt like a wound, infected and weeping. The hum of life she usually felt from the forest was weak here, a faint and struggling pulse beneath a cacophony of sickness. It was agonizing, like listening to a beloved friend cry out in pain. "The blight grows stronger here," one of the warriors muttered, his hand on the hilt of his blade. "The source must be near," Selina announced, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Spread out. Look for any signs of unnatural growth, any focus of the corruption." The warriors began to move apart, their steps cautious. Darian stayed glued to Rowan's side. "What do you feel?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble only she could hear. "It hurts," she whispered, her hand instinctively going to her chest. "The land, it's in pain. It's coming from that way." She pointed toward a dense thicket of gnarled, leafless thorns. Selene overheard. "The thorns? That thicket is impenetrable and likely full of vipers. The source will be something more obvious. A corrupted spring, a blighted tree." She was already moving in the opposite direction, toward a grove of skeletal-looking aspens. The other wolves hesitated, looking between the beta healer and their prince. Darian's trust in Rowan was absolute. "We'll check the thorns," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He looked at Rowan. "Lead the way." With a deep breath, she moved toward the thorn thicket. The closer she got, the more intense the feeling of pain became. It was a sharp, stabbing agony now, centered just beyond the wall of brambles. The thorns were black and wicked, laced together so tightly it seemed impossible to pass. "There's no way through," a warrior named Garrick said, shaking his head. Rowan stopped before the wall of thorns. She closed her eyes, shutting out the skeptical faces of the others, and focused on the feeling Darian had told her to trust. She reached out, not with her hands, but with her senses, with that strange green part of her soul. She didn't try to fight the thorns. She tried to listen to them. They were in pain too, twisted and sickened by the same blight. But beneath the pain, she could feel their life force, however faint. They were not evil, merely afflicted. "Let us pass," she thought, not in words but in a feeling. A plea of shared pain, a promise of healing. "The source of your sickness is within. Let us help." Something incredible happened. A low groaning sound, like the stretching of old wood, filled the air. The thorns, sharp and interlocking, began to slowly, painstakingly pull apart. Twisted branches untwined themselves, creating a narrow, arching tunnel through the heart of the thicket. The other wolves gasped, their eyes wide with disbelief. Selene, who had turned back at the sound, stared with her mouth agape, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. Darian simply watched Rowan, a look of fierce pride on his face. Rowan opened her eyes and walked into the passage the thorns had made for her. The others followed, their previous skepticism replaced with a new, awestruck respect. The tunnel opened into a small, hidden clearing. In the center was the source of the blight. It was a shard of obsidian-like rock, half buried in the earth, pulsing with a malevolent violet light. It was not of this world. Dark, corrupting veins spread out from it like black roots, poisoning the soil, killing everything they touched. At its base, the ground was black and cracked, and the air smelled of rot and dark magic. Guarding the shard was a beast from a nightmare. It was a great bear, but twisted and corrupted. Its fur was patchy and matted. Its eyes burned with the same violet light as the stone, and sickly, unnatural thorns grew from its back. It was a creature of the forest that had been warped by the blight's power, turned into its mindless guardian. The bear let out a guttural roar as it saw them, a sound of pure agony and rage. It charged. The warriors leapt into action, their training taking over. They shifted in a blur of motion, their bodies breaking and reforming into massive wolves. They met the bear's charge with snapping jaws and powerful claws, but the creature was unnaturally strong, fueled by the dark magic of the shard. It swiped a wolf aside with a single blow, sending the warrior crashing into a tree. Darian was a whirlwind of black fur and righteous fury. He was larger than the others, his alpha power radiating from him as he tore at the bear's flank, trying to draw its attention. But the creature was focused only on defending the stone. Rowan stood frozen, watching the violent clash. She was useless, a liability just as Celine had predicted. But then her gaze fell upon the corrupted bear, and through the rage she felt its immense pain. It didn't want to fight. It was a slave to the shard. Her heart ached for it. Ignoring Darian's shouted warning, she walked forward, toward the battle, toward the pulsing stone. The logical part of her mind screamed in terror, but the humming, green part of her soul knew what it had to do. The bear, seeing her approach the shard, bellowed and shook off 2 wolves, turning its maddened violet gaze on her. It reared up on its hind legs, ready to bring its massive claws down upon her. "Rowan, no!" Darian roared, trying to intercept. But Rowan didn't run. She stood her ground, held up a hand, and closed her eyes again. She didn't have claws or fangs, but she had her gift. She reached out with her spirit, not to the bear's rage, but to the flicker of true forest spirit still trapped within it. "Peace," she projected, a wave of calm green energy. "You are in pain. Let me help you. You are a child of the forest, not a slave to this stone. Remember the Sunday, remember the sweet berries, remember your true self." Her voice, though silent, was a force of nature. It was the scent of clean earth, the feeling of cool water, the memory of a deep winter's sleep. The green healing energy washed over the corrupted bear. The creature halted its attack, its claws frozen in mid-air. A tremor ran through its massive frame. The violent violet light in its eyes flickered, warring with a dawning awareness. A low, mournful whine escaped its throat, a sound not of rage, but of confusion and deep, deep sorrow. It slowly lowered itself back to all fours, the madness receding from its gaze. The wolves stared, frozen in their battle stances, utterly stunned. Rowan didn't stop. Keeping her focus on the now subdued bear, she walked past it until she stood before the pulsing obsidian shard. The waves of corruption washing from it were nauseating, a pure distillation of decay. It felt like plunging her hands into ice, but she could also feel the land beneath it, crying out, suffocating. She knelt and placed both of her hands on the cold, corrupted earth beside the stone. She didn't try to fight the darkness. She focused on the life beneath it. She poured her own energy, her own strange, vital gift, into the soil. She offered it the memory of life, a song of green and growing things. "Grow," she urged the earth. "Live." Where her hands touched the ground, a miracle occurred. A tiny green sprout pushed its way through the cracked, black soil. Then another and another. A circle of vibrant green life began to spread out from her hands, pushing back the darkness. The grass grew with impossible speed, lush and verdant, fighting back against the encroaching blight. The black, corrupting veins in the earth began to sizzle and retract from the touch of this pure, new life. The obsidian shard reacted violently. It let out a high-pitched shriek, and the violet light within it flared. But it was being starved, its connection to the land severed by Rowan's healing touch. The light flickered, dimmed, and with a final sickening crack, the stone shattered into 1,000 pieces of dull, powerless rock. A collective sigh seemed to pass through the gloomwood. The oppressive weight in the air lifted. A sunbeam pierced the canopy for the first time, illuminating the clearing. The corrupted bear shook its head, as if waking from a long nightmare, the last of the violet light fading from its eyes. It looked at Rowan with something like gratitude, then turned and lumbered peacefully back into the now healing forest. The wolves shifted back to their human forms, their faces a canvas of awe and reverence. They looked from the shattered stone to the circle of impossible green, and then to Rowan, who was still kneeling, pale and trembling from the effort. Celine's face was ashen, her ambition replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. She had seen the impossible. Darian was at Rowan's side in an instant, dropping to his knees and gathering her into his arms. "Rowan," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He held her tight as if he could pour his own strength back into her. "You did it. By the goddess, you did it." She leaned against him, utterly spent but filled with a staggering sense of purpose. She had not fought. She had healed. She had not used teeth and claws. She had used her heart, her spirit, her curse. The other warriors gathered around, their gazes no longer filled with skepticism, but with wonder. Garrick, the warrior who had doubted her, dropped to one knee. "My Luna," he said, his voice rough with respect. One by one, the other wolves knelt before her. They knelt before the shiftless girl, the cursed Omega, the waif their prince had brought back from the brink of death. In the heart of the dying woods, surrounded by the new life she had created, Rowan finally understood. Her parents had been wrong. Her old pack had been wrong. She wasn't cursed. She wasn't broken. She was a Viridian wolf, a healer of the land, a power not seen in generations. And as she looked up into the proud, adoring, golden eyes of her mate, she knew she was finally home. The return to the Moonshadow settlement was a triumph. The story of Rowan's feat in the gloomwood spread like wildfire, carried by the awestruck warriors who had witnessed it. They spoke of how she had faced down the corrupted bear not with force, but with a strange, calming power. They described with reverence how she had commanded the thorns to part and healed the very earth with her touch, shattering the blighted stone that had stumped their most skilled trackers and healers. By the time the party reached the Great Hall, the entire pack was assembled, their faces alight with curiosity and wonder. When they saw the warriors who had accompanied her, proud and fierce wolves, kneel as she passed, a wave of understanding and acceptance rippled through the crowd. This was not the weak, cursed girl they had first seen. This was a Luna of a different kind of power. Alaric stood waiting on the steps of the Alpha's hall, his golden eyes filled with a profound, solemn respect. Celine stood behind him, her face pale, her earlier arrogance completely stripped away, replaced by a grudging, fearful acknowledgement. As Darian led Rowan forward, the pack parted for them like a river around a stone. Rowan's steps were no longer timid. She walked with a newfound confidence, her head held high. She was still overwhelmed, but the deep, gnawing insecurity had been replaced by a quiet certainty in her own worth. "The blight is broken," Darian announced, his voice ringing with pride for all to hear. "The Gloomwood will heal. My mate, Rowan, has saved it." He didn't need to say more. The proof was in the faces of the warriors who had been there. Alaric descended the steps and stood before Rowan. The great Alpha King, who commanded the respect of every pack in the Northern Territories, looked down at the small girl his son had chosen. "They called you cursed," Alaric said, his deep voice resonating through the clearing. "They were blind. What you possess is not a curse, but a sacred gift. A blessing from the goddess not just to my son, but to our entire pack. You have healed the land, which is the soul of our people. There is no greater strength a Luna could possess." He then did something that stunned the entire pack into silence. The Alpha King bent his knee, bowing his head to her in a gesture of ultimate respect. "Luna Rowan," he declared, "we are honored to have you." A roar of approval erupted from the pack. They cheered, they stomped their feet, they howled their acceptance to the moon, which was just beginning to rise. It was a chorus of joyous belonging, and it washed over Rowan, healing the last of the scars from her past. Darian pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, his laughter mixing with the cheers of his people. Later that evening, as the pack celebrated with a feast in the great hall, a messenger arrived, breathless and grim-faced. He was from a neighbouring pack, and he brought news that silenced the festivities. "It's the Stonecrest pack, Alpha King," the messenger panted, bowing before Alaric. "Their Alpha, Jaeger, has heard that the girl he exiled not only survived, but has been claimed by the Alpha Prince. He is furious. He says she is a blight, a danger he tried to purge, and that the Moonshadow Pack is harbouring a great evil. He is demanding her return." A cold silence fell over the hall. Rowan felt a chill of her old fear return. Her father, Alpha Jaeger. "He claims she is his property," the messenger continued nervously. "And he says if she is not returned by the next full moon, he will consider it an act of war." Rage, cold and absolute, radiated from Darian. His hand found Rowan's, his grip a promise of protection. "He will have his war then," Darian snarled. "He will not touch a single hair on her head." But Alaric held up a hand, his expression calm and calculating. "Jaeger is a fool, driven by pride and shame. He knows he cannot win a war with us. This is a desperate gambit to save face." He looked toward the messenger. "Send a reply. There will be a formal gathering of the packs at the Greymark border in 3 days. Alpha Jaeger can make his ridiculous claims there before all the Alphas, and he will receive our answer there." It was a brilliant political move. Jaeger would be forced to air his grievances and his cruelty, not just to the Moonshadow Pack, but to all the neutral powers in the region. The next 3 days were tense, but Rowan did not feel fear. She felt a quiet resolve. She spent her time with Darian, walking the now healing edges of the Gloomwood. With her guidance, the pack's healers learned to identify and cultivate the specific herbs that thrived in her presence, creating poultices that accelerated the land's recovery. She was no longer a patient, but a teacher. Her connection to the forest was a resource the entire pack was learning to value. The night before the gathering, Darian took her to the balcony of their chambers. The moon was a sliver of silver in the ink-black sky. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. his chin resting on her head. "I am," she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "I'm not the same girl they threw away, Darian." "No," he agreed, his voice a low hum against her hair. "You are the Luna of the Moonshadow Pack." He turned her in his arms, his golden eyes serious in the moonlight. "And you are the entire world to me." He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't like the chaste, comforting touches they had shared before. This was a kiss of deep, soul-shattering passion. It was a culmination of everything: the fated bond, the shared trials, the fierce protectiveness, the dawning love. It was a seal on their union, a promise of a future forged together. When they broke apart, they were both breathless. The last vestiges of her fear had been burned away by the heat of his devotion. The gathering at the Greymark was a tense affair. The alphas of 5 packs were present, their elite warriors standing behind them, a silent display of power. Alpha Jaegar of the Stonecrest Pack stood opposite Alaric and Darian, his face a mask of bitter resentment. Behind him, Rowan saw her parents, their expressions a mixture of fear and defiance. "You have harbored a curse!" Jaegar bellowed, his voice lacking the calm authority of a true alpha. "That thing is an abomination." She failed her shift. "She is a hollow vessel, a danger to us all. I did my duty by purging her. She belongs to my pack, and I demand her return so that the sentence can be properly carried out." Rowan stood beside Darian, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. She looked at her parents, at the alpha who had condemned her, and felt not terror, but a profound pity for their blindness. Alaric spoke, his voice calm and carrying easily across the clearing. "You did not purge a curse, Jaegar. You threw away a treasure. You abandoned a child of your pack to die because you feared what you did not understand. That is not the act of a strong alpha, it is the act of a coward." A murmur went through the other alphas. Alaric's words rang with truth. "And she is not yours to demand," Darian added, his voice like flint. "She is my fated mate, claimed by me, accepted by my pack, and blessed by the goddess. She is the Luna of the Moonshadow Pack. If you wish to take her, you must go through me and all my warriors." Jaegar paled. It was a direct challenge he could not hope to win. But it was Rowan who delivered the final blow. She stepped forward, her small frame seeming to radiate an immense, quiet power. "I am not a thing to be claimed or discarded," she said, her voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the clearing. "You call me a curse because I cannot take the form of a wolf, but my gift is to the land, which gives us all life." She knelt, placing a hand on the neutral ground of the Greymark, a place known for its sparse, rocky soil. She closed her eyes and did as she had done in the Gloomwood, pouring her spirit into the earth. A collective gasp went through the assembled packs. From the barren ground where her hand rested, a patch of brilliant blue moonpetal flowers bloomed, unfurling their petals to the sky with impossible speed. They were a rare, sacred flower, said to only grow in places with the goddess's direct blessing. Rowan stood, leaving the patch of impossible beauty as a testament to her power. She looked directly at her former alpha. "My name is Rowan. My wolf is the very earth you stand upon. I am no one's property. I am the Viridian Luna of the Moonshadow Pack, and I am home." The other alphas stared, first at the flowers, then at Rowan, with dawning comprehension and awe. They had witnessed a miracle. Jaegar's claims turned to dust, exposed as the jealous rantings of a weak and foolish leader. He was shamed, his cruelty and ignorance laid bare for all to see. He and his pack retreated, their heads bowed, their honor in tatters. Rowan's parents didn't even look at her as they left. They simply scurried away in the shadow of their disgraced alpha. The girl they had thrown away was now a power in her own right, beloved and revered, while they were tied to a failed pack. That was a sentence far more fitting than any she could have imagined. As the Stonecrest pack disappeared, Darian pulled Rowan to his side, his arm wrapping securely around her waist. The other alphas approached, not with suspicion, but with offers of alliance and friendship, eager to be aligned with this new, strange power. Standing beside her mate, accepted by her people, and respected by the world that had once scorned her, Rowan looked out at her future. It was a future not of surviving, but of thriving. She was not the cursed girl left to die. She was Rowan, the Alpha Prince's mate, a healer of the land, a Luna whose strength came not from the beast, but from the heart. And her story, she knew, was just beginning.